The Autism Research Institute relies on the generosity of donors like you to make this webcast possible. If you enjoy this presentation, please consider making a donation. Thank you.
Now, before we get started, I'll introduce our speaker. Lindsey Biel is a pediatric occupational therapist with a private practice in New York City where she evaluates and treats children, adolescents, and young adults with sensory processing issues, developmental delays, autism spectrum disorders, and other challenges. With the COVID-19 pandemic, she now offers teletherapy to families and schools nationwide. You can type your questions into the questions section now and throughout the talk. And now I'll turn it over to Lindsey.
Hi, everybody, and I'm so happy to be here with you today during this crazy, surreal time of COVID-19. I'm based in New York City, and our schools just opened this week, and we're waiting to see what happens and hoping for the best for all of us, for your family, for you, your family, your loved ones, your clients, everybody. So today I'm going to share with you some strategies. I call them sensory smart strategies that I believe will be very helpful for you during this pandemic, and I think a lot of them you'll be able to carry over when we go back to the old normal. So good for the new normal, and many of them helpful during when we return to our normal. So here we go. I'm the author of 2 books. I'm actually writing the third. The first is Raising a Sensory Smart Child, with a foreword by Temple Grandin, and it first came out in 2004. There's a new edition that came out in 2018, all new, up to date, lots more information on helping kids, teens, and adults with autism and sensory issues. In 2014, I wrote Sensory Processing Challenges, Effective Clinical Work with Kids and Teens, and I really geared that one for the mental health professional and other of the so-called experts who didn't quite get the sensory issues and how to work with those with their clients. So those are the 2 books that I have for you. So just really quickly, I know that, all of us are on different places, different spots where we're learning about sensory issues. Just so really quickly, quick definition, sensory processing is simply how we first learn about the world is through our senses, right? We hear things, we see things, we touch things, we move our bodies through space, we taste and we smell. And sensory processing is the neurological process of taking all those little bits of information and transforming them into meaningful messages. This is something that usually occurs automatically. However, because of nervous system wiring, some people take in and use that information in a different way. And not a bad way. Not a horrible way, any of those things. It's a different way of experiencing the world. Now, this can range from the little quirks that most of us have. I don't like the clothing tags in my shirts. I don't like wool against my skin. I can't stand fluorescent lighting, this kind of thing. It's not really interfering in my ability to participate in my daily life tasks. It can range all the way there to severe dysfunction, which we often see, we see most often with autism. We're talking about a low grade buzz of pain or discomfort throughout the day based on the noise that's going on in the world. Maybe the way clothing feels is just really uncomfortable. Or I've heard from people, my friends and clients with autism, that sometimes it's like whiteout, a total whiteout. It's so overwhelming and intense that it really makes it life very difficult, and it can be disabling for those people. So there's a range, it's a spectrum like everything else. We're so used to using that word at this time. So let's think about our, okay. Okay, not everybody with sensory processing challenges is on the autism spectrum. Just about everybody on the autism spectrum has sensory processing issues. So it adds into that terrible dysregulation that can be so uncomfortable and so disabling for our clients, for our friends, for our children. Then you add this pandemic. You know, when you think about it, most of us thrive on routine and predictability, right? If you're neurotypically developing, we all have these routines, and this pandemic has thrown that all, you know, aside. We're still all these months into it trying to develop that nice routine. For the people that we care about on the spectrum and those with sensory issues, it's so dysregulating between COVID-19 and this whole remote and hybrid learning, and am I going to be able to go into school in person? How do I have to behave in a way that's safe? And everyone has all these demands on me. How is that working? And then, you know, a lot of us are very concerned about the election and climate change. Really, right now, more than ever, life is anything but certain. I hope by this point in time, you've developed a nice, predictable routine as much as possible, even if you're working at home or your child is learning at home or on that hybrid model. Getting up at the same time each morning, getting dressed, eating, and going to either remote or in-person school and work is essential. So keep up those routines. Create a written or a visual plan for the day to help the person know what to expect. And that goes across the board. So you know to do this, you know, this is what's going to happen throughout the day, either with words or with photos, just so it's imposing some level of structure and predictability over the day. And then to help to keep the person or you more regulated, you really need to support the sensory needs, the motor physical needs, and the emotional needs to help the person or for you to feel safe and more regulated. So we're going to start with sensory breaks that help to reset brains and bodies so we can stay tuned in and function to the best of our ability. It is very important to have a sensory haven. So at home or at school, or if you're at work, to create a retreat for when it's all just too much. And what does that look like? Typically, what's going to work for somebody, and it's a little bit different for each person, is to have nice dim light, gentle sounds, comforting sounds, often a rhythmic sound, oral comforts like chewing gum or, you know, a crunchy carrot, something to get those oral needs met. Some pleasant smells. I like to use essential oil with a person who needs to have a sensory break. And what I like to do with my clients is to set up a toolbox, a sensory toolbox. I've given you an example on this slide of a toolbox for a child in 2nd grade, and he loves the smell of citrus. It's interesting with the essential oil, it is very idiosyncratic. You're not going to diffuse it throughout a classroom or throughout your home if you have more than one child and they don't all agree on the essential oil that they like. In general, the citrus smells tend to arouse and alert the person. I like them in the morning especially. And florals like lavender or rose tend to be more calming, but it's very idiosyncratic what someone's going to need to feel just right, and feel good that way. So smelling it in this particular child's box, smelling his citrus essential oil, drinking water, chewing gum was very helpful for him. He's not someone who was going to swallow the gum, so that worked out pretty well. He also liked to just take a moment with his books. He found his books really organizing and soothing. Reading a book, lifting some weights, just light weights that we kept in the box, using some putty to squeeze, just to get those needs met, and then doing something called Take 5 breathing. And you can look that up. It's a really nice deep breathing exercise. And when you set up a sensory haven for somebody, let's say you have a child in a class, they're getting overstimulated, they need to take a break, you're going to limit it. For this child, he did best with a 5-minute balance break. That's what we called it. And we would set a timer, such as what you slide. And right now in this photo, it happens to be set to 45 minutes. But if you set it for 5 minutes, it would be up there at number 5, and the red disc would disappear as the time elapsed. So another thing, so you have your sensory breaks, and that's very, again, idiosyncratic. You need to individualize it to what that person finds or you find organizing. Then we also, we're at a point where all of our normal ways of getting our yayas out are limited now. We can't easily just go for a walk. At school, kids can't go to the gym or to the playground and freely play the way we're used to playing. And that's very difficult, especially since we know that movement stimulating the vestibular system in the inner ear resets the eyes and the brains and the body. So at the very least, while we're in this more limited mode and beyond in a classroom, it's always needs to be kind of managed. Just having the person stand up, stretch, take a walk, even if just maybe 10 times around a chair, setting up an obstacle course, climbing a couple of sets of stairs, even just sitting and bouncing on a therapy ball can really help to reset things for the person. The GoNoodle.com website has wonderful activities, both alerting activities if you or the child you're working with or raising is kind of falling into a slump. These are great activities to increase their arousal level. And if kids are overstimulated, it also has mindfulness, meditation, calming kinds of activities to lower the arousal level. Dysregulation is like when the nervous system arousal level is kind of all over the place. And we want to reach that optimal state of arousal that's right in the middle. Another easy way to implement a movement break in a classroom or at home, this is for generally younger kids, is something like Move Your Body card deck from Super Duper. You can see some of the cards there. Kids pull out cards and do these movements, and they really love them. They're lots of fun to do. One of the things that I love to do with kids and teens is Simon Says, and I can sort of read where they're at physically and play Simon Says with them. I'm not so much into getting them out. For those of you who are maybe not familiar with Simon Says, you say something like, Simon Says, run in place. And then the person should run in place. And then if you just yell stop and they stop, they would be out. I don't like to make people get out right now for this purpose. So it has to be Simon Says stop, and then they stop. So you can get all kinds of great movement in by playing Simon Says. Another easy way to get some movement in that's very regulating is by doing shoulder shrugs, right? Just raising up the shoulders and releasing them. We're all very tense. We're all like this, especially if you're on the phone. So getting those shoulder shrugs, getting kids doing arm circles, or teens or even adults, or you just opening up that energy and getting that movement. I do 10 times in one direction with people and then 10 times in the other direction. Karate hands, just bring your arms forward and making a fist and extending the fingers 10 times this way. And then you flip your hands up, palms up, and do it 10 times that way. It's just a quick reset, and it feels good, and it works really well. So also doing some yoga poses. Here are some favorites: the child's pose on the upper left, the cobra pose on the upper right, the cat-cow pose. See the way her spine is flexed on the top and then, extended on the top and then flexed on the bottom. And then downward dog there on the bottom right. So these kinds of things are very easy to implement without needing a lot of space. So at school, for example, if you take some tape, masking tape or painter's tape, and make a square on the floor, a child could do just about all of this inside of that square. So that's a good way to get the social distancing in. Here's another thing that I do with people. They spell their names. So we're going to spell my name, L, 5 lion roars, I, 5 leg raises each side, N, 5 jump ups, and so on. So they can spell whatever words they like. I actually do personalize this for certain kids who need to work on certain things. I'll switch around what's going on and make sure that their name has the letters, has the exercises that I need for their letters of their name. This is something wonderful in this platform that we're doing today's webinar on. I can't make it spin, but basically this is from wheelofnames.com. And you just type in the exercises to do, and then I click on the middle circle. It spins around, there's confetti, it's all wonderful, and they do those exercises. And it's really fun. And I like to have different people, we'll take turns. If I'm working with one person, we'll take turns picking the exercises. If it's a group of people, it can become a group project to pick those exercises. Okay. So then we start to get into teens and adults, and it's not going to be the same for them as it is for the younger kids. I like brain gym exercises a lot for teens and adults, and two of them we'll go through two of them. One is lazy eights, and I hope you can see this. Gonna look at your thumb and go ahead and try this and move through, like make an infinity sign, like an 8 that has fallen over. You're gonna follow your thumb. For some people, you may need to draw that infinity sign, that lazy 8, and then they can more easily follow it. For some people, it's going to be hand over hand to help guide them through that movement. And then you do the non-dominant hand. So that's good, right? You can also interlace the fingers and do it that way. Then there's the cross crawl, and it's probably not going to work that well on this platform, but basically the cross crawl is getting the two hemispheres of the brain talking to each other through movement. So you might start it with standing up, putting your right hand on your left knee, and then your left hand on your right knee, and switching and switching and switching, and then going for the elbows, the right elbow to the left knee, the left elbow to the right knee, and so on. So you can see these exercises on YouTube. Look up Brain Gym on YouTube, and that'll be easy to see how these exercises work. And they're very popular with kids and adults, and they're really fun. A client of mine decided she wanted to learn how to hip hop dance, and she's using something called Steezy Dance Lessons. So that's at steezy.co, and I know that seems strange, it's not com, but it is co. And what it is, it's step-by-step broken up learning in order to do hip hop dance. And I think also some jazz moves, this kind of thing. And it's really, I love it because it does take these complex moves and breaks it up so that the person can learn the sequence. Also for teens and adults, obviously using gym equipment, if it's available, is wonderful. Running laps, if that's available, doing Pilates and strength training, as well as yoga. I showed you some of the easy moves earlier. You can, again, look on YouTube and find a lot of wonderful programs. There's also a game called Yoga Spinner that a lot of people love. Yogarilla is another game. There's lots of different ways to get into these movements that really do organize our kids and ourselves. Another game I like to do with kids is blowing up a punch balloon and using a lightweight racket or even just a hand to swat that balloon back and forth. Toy toss is when I throw up the balloon and a person tries to hit the balloon with a soft toy. You definitely want a soft toy, not a hard toy. I like Beanie Baby kind of toys, and that's really fun. It just kind of gets out that energy proprioceptively that is so organizing for ourselves, for everybody. And then, of course, we must not forget to breathe. All of us we're all tense, right? And when someone is dysregulated and we tell them, we say, oh, you look like you're getting, uncomfortable or upset, breathe, take 5 deep breaths. And what I see over and over again is like, okay, that's 5 deep breaths, right? But what it is hyperventilation. And all that does is increases the breath rate, keeps it shallow, increases the pulse, and further dysregulates the person. So we're looking for deep breaths. Whistles and blow toys are wonderful. Anytime you focus on the exhale, you're going to get more out of it. Because if you exhale, you have to inhale, right? So blowing feathers off a hand or cotton balls across the table through a straw is great. Making a bubble mountain, I'm not sure. Oh, there we go. Oh, sorry. Let me go back. It does work. All right, this is, first I made sure this little fellow is not going to drink the bubble liquid. So I put some water and like dish soap in it, and that's aquarium tubing. Yeah, I should blow too. Usually I do blow. Okay, so that's a great way to get a lot of exhale, and that's a lot of fun. So that's a great thing to do. For really any age, it's really so much fun to do, to get that exhale and make that big mountain of bubbles, or, a bubble volcano, whatever you want to call it. Yoga breathing, lion breathing. Again, anytime someone makes noise when they're breathing, they're going to be exhaling, really deeply exhaling. So I'll have a class of kids roar like lions. When I do my workshops, I have like a whole room of people roaring like lions, and it really is very regulating. So we're going to move right along and talk about desk time and screen time. I don't know if you're you or your loved ones are doing school at home or, in person, but no matter, the remote learning requires any kind of learning, actually, requires managing the sensory needs, being able to sit still and focus for increasingly long periods, physical stability and security, as well as seeing well and eating well and sleeping well. And I know you're thinking, these are easier said than done. So let's talk about at-home learning or at-home work. You definitely want to set aside a special area in your home if possible. This is a learning space for a young lady that I work with, and obviously that needed to be re-engineered. Unfortunately, the beautiful pussycat had to move, and we needed to really clear everything off because she just could not focus on what she was doing, and understandably so. I could hardly focus with that gorgeous cat there. So reducing clutter as much as possible to provide a clear, clean workspace, eliminating visual and noise distractions, again, as much as possible. Now, you can, if it's, you can also close things off. You can put up curtains. You can tack them onto walls, onto cabinets that are open where there's so many distractions. You can create a privacy partition in a busy room. If you have kids that are next to each other that are looking at each other, to set up to take a piece of cardboard and cut it so that it looks like the one in this picture, just creates a space, sort of a sensory space. This is my visual space. That can be very helpful. Using headphones to block out noise and listen better can be super helpful. At school, consider if a child is having difficulty with auditory hypersensitivity. Do they need something called an FM unit where the teacher speaks into a microphone and his or her voice is brought more closely to the listener's ears, either through earbuds or a speaker mounted nearby, or if the person has a cochlear implant, it can be, the FM unit can be attached to the cochlear implant. That can help to help the person to listen better, pay better attention from an auditory standpoint. Certainly you're going to organize materials. We're back to the at-home learning. I've been doing a lot of at-home learning, and it's like, where's your pencils? Where's your scissors, your tape? You want to get all that stuff together and always have it together. Also cleaning eyeglasses before the remote learning sessions begin, and to make sure the tech is charged and working before that begins. Again, try diffusing an essential oil, but keep in mind that not everybody in the classroom or in the home or workplace is going to like the same scent. So you really want to think about that. You can always put a little bit of an essential oil on like a cotton pad and put that inside of a jar, and the person could smell the oil when they're feeling dysregulated and use it that way. So always position to play and learn, and that's in class, that's at home, that's at work. A lot of times a child, I'll hear, well, my child is falling off their chair, they won't sit still, they're always getting up. It has to be comfortable to be where they are, right? So you need a solid base of support at the hips and knees and ankles. Should be about 80 to 90 degree angles, right? The feet should be able to reach the floor. A lot of times a person, a little kid won't, the complaint is they won't sit still at the dinner table. And, I get to go into the home, and now I'm doing it remotely. If they have no stability in seated, of course they're going to slide off. They're just sliding off these adult chairs. So you want to add a footrest or a band around the front chair legs so that the person can rest their feet on it or even kick their feet against the band. Better to kick against the band than against you or a sibling. The pelvis needs to be in neutral so the spine can elongate. What does that mean? That means, a person who slouches when they're sitting. Try sort of doing that, slouching like a teenager with an attitude, right? And then try to bring yourself up, elongate your spine. That is your pelvis, your hips that's tilting back and then coming forward. So not everybody can do that, especially someone with low muscle tone or poor core strength. So I like to add a move and sit junior, or for an adult, just a full size move and sit, moderately inflated with the wide end towards the back, such as the one in the photo with this girl. And there's a bumpy side and a smooth side. Most of my sensory seekers like the bumpy side. You also want to make sure the person is sitting at an appropriate size table. No, not having to hike up their shoulders to write or to eat dinner, that kind of thing. And no slumping because the laptop is tilted too low, so they have to slump over it in a way that just makes everything uncomfortable and strains the eyes, strains the neck, causes headaches, and so on. Definitely want to consider lighting. Avoid overhead lighting, which reflects off surfaces. You're going to add matte paper to the table if this is the only light source available. So you have the overhead light, so fluorescent lights are horrendous, and they're still, unfortunately, in a lot of our schools, in a lot of our workplaces, in our bathrooms. They're still all over the place. And sensitive people can see and hear the fluorescent lights as they flicker on and off. So think about that light beaming down and bouncing off the tabletop into the person's eyes. Really bad news. So you're going to add matte paper. We used to have blotters, desk blotters, but you can just put any non-shiny paper onto the tabletop if you can't turn off those overhead lights. The best thing is to have a table lamp at eye level, right? But you may not be able to do that, right? You want to get rid of the fluorescence, replace it with a warm LED bulb. An old-fashioned incandescent bulb actually is a great thing for people on the spectrum with visual sensitivities. Halogen bulbs are also pretty good. And then diffused natural light is great. You don't want to have the sun beaming in on the person, so you want to have some kind of shade. You can also add a light diffuser to a ceiling fixture. Let's say you can't do anything about the lighting. You're stuck with the fluorescent light. So you can use something like a cozy shade, it's called, and attach that to the metal ballast, and then it will diffuse the light as it comes down. Now, doing screen, spending time on the screen. A lot of people on the spectrum have what's called contrast sensitivity. They have all kinds of visual sensitivities. And without going too much into that, I just to explain that for some people, the black type on the white background is too much. It's jarring, it's upsetting. The letters start to break up and move around, and we don't want that. A lot of times a person may be able to read quite well and be really interested in a lesson or something that's going on the screen, but because of their visual sensitivities, they just can't do it. So what you can do is you can add a color screen filter. On an iPhone or an iPad, I've given you the directions for how to get there. They're basically built-in color filters that are preset, or you can customize the tint a little bit here and there. And it's a little bit different on a Mac computer to find it. Android phones and tablets don't have them built in, at least as the last time I checked. And there's an app you can get for that called the Erlen Colored Overlay app for the Android products. Windows 10, Chromebooks, each one has a slight difference there. And I want to just briefly mention Erlen. A lot of people do have this sensitivity, visual sensitivity, and they do really well with what are called Erlen filters. And these are, they can be special eyeglasses that have these color filters, or it can be like a colored overlay that has them, that you would put like on top of a book that you were reading, that can really help with visual processing and decrease some of those sensitivity problems. So you can go to Erlen.com to learn more about that, IRLEN.com. And you can, there's like a nifty little self-test there and lots of information about that. So I want to show you why it makes such a huge difference. You have this versus this versus, so, right? So think about which one is easier for you to read. How do your eyes relax the most? What about this one? This is the one I like the best. When I do my workshops, I'll typically show a bunch of them. And I'm always fascinated by, there's no pattern, you know, it's again, so idiosyncratic. So find out, you can test these different filters. And if you're working with someone, ask them which one they like the most, right? Which one makes your eyes feel happiest? Might be the first time they ever got asked that. Let's talk about the masks, right? People are hopefully getting used to wearing masks. I know I've gotten used to it. I found masks that I like, that are comfortable enough for me. I know my friends and clients on the spectrum are still struggling with this. So I want to give you a couple of strategies. So first of all, obviously be a good role model. When you put on your mask, you're not going to say, let me see if I have one of my favorites here. No, they're in the other room, of course. You know, it's like, oh, I got to put on my mask. When you put it on, it's like, I hate this thing, right? It's like, oh, it's time to put on my mask. It's not a big deal, right? I'm going to protect others by wearing my mask. I feel really good about that. When you get a new mask, practice at home, right? And slowly increase the wearing time. There are so many different kinds of masks and different sensations for those masks. We'll talk about them a little bit more. Let me just see some. Yes, okay. So you're going to obviously tap into interests. If you or your child really loves animals, you're going to get an animal theme mask, right? Superhero masks. It's kind of cool because most superheroes do wear masks. So, you know, a Batman mask or a Spider-Man mask, that kind of thing. A sports team mask. It's all out there now. I mean, Disney has them. Crayola has them. There's so many. Again, I'm back on the essential oil, but one of the things that is hardest about the mask is the smell of the material itself. Our kids and teens and adults, and maybe you, are so sensitive to smell. If you've discovered an essential oil that works, put a tiny drop of it on the outside edge of the mask. You're not going to put it in front of the nose. It's too much. And you're going to test it at home before going out with that mask. You do, you know, because you don't want to put it on and say, oh, it's great, I love it. And then you go out and then the child's like, oh, I can't stand this. This stinks, this kind of thing. You know, it can be overstimulating. So you definitely want to test it out and bring along a mask that you haven't put any oil on, just in case. If it's appropriate or safe for that person to do so, you can certainly give gum, especially for the kids who chew on the mask. They pull off the ear loop and start chewing on that. or they suck in the fabric and start chewing on it, this definitely is not a great thing. You can offer a hand tool like a squishy ball or a silly putty or a koosh ball or a spinner ring to redirect fidgeting from the mask, right? They're always fidgeting with their mask, pulling it under their nose to something else. I mean, it can be anything, you know, a little eraser, anything. So also practicing deep calming breaths through the nose rather than the mouth, using a visual like take 5 breathing. So I've mentioned that twice now. I'm going to quickly do it with you. There is a video online. Let me just see if I have it here. Okay. A video online. You just look up take 5 breathing. Let's do it quickly together. You're just going to have the person trace up the finger, hold at the top, and then exhale down. Go ahead and try it. In through the nose and out through the mouth. A lot of the reasons that people feel like they're not getting enough air when they're wearing a mask is that they're not inhaling deeply. They're putting on the mask and they feel like it's back to that shallow breathing, shallow, rapid breathing. Like, oh, I can't breathe with this thing on my face. There have been test after test after test showing that it does not decrease the oxygen intake unless you or the person really has a pre-existing condition. If your breathing is otherwise normal and your oxygen saturation is otherwise normal, if you just, you know, breathe a little bit more slowly through the nose, you should be okay. So let's talk about the masks themselves. Now, a lot of people, the disposable masks, as it ends up, are really good, really good. They offer a lot of protection. However, they often don't fit well and they don't seal well. They can get kind of hot and slide under the nose, right? So, but a lot of people do prefer them. So if you or a child, your client does like these, but they're too loose, you can fold the mask in half, tie a knot at the edges of the mask, right at the edge, snugged right in, and then push the sides of the mask under the knot to reduce the gaps, right? You can also add a cord lock to snug it up. Reusable masks, you definitely want to wash it in hot water with unscented detergent before it's ever worn to remove the smells of sizing and packaging, and wash it every day with hot water and, again, unscented detergent. If it's soiled, if the person goes into an environment where there's kind of higher risk, higher germ pool going on, could wash it more than once a day or change into a fresh one. For a lot of people, straps with adjustable cotton ear loops that go, you know, right behind the ears are a lot more comfortable than straps that go behind the head that can tug on hair. If you are using one that goes behind the head, and if it's a girl or even a boy with longer hair, you want to get that hair up in a ponytail and get the straps under. You don't want to have that hair pulling because that's part of the upset with that. You can also sew buttons onto a cap or a snug fitting headband and then attach the ear loops to that. So it's not like pulling on the ears. Here's a clear mouth mask that I use with my clients, and they're kind of weird looking, right? But this is the Fun and Function social mask. It's interesting because since the pandemic, I started working with a 14-month-old who he was then 12 months old when I started, and he's, you know, having a lot of difficulties, and here I am showing up with only half a face behind a mask. So I went out and I got this really great clear mouth mask, and The first time I came, I smiled at him, and for the first time, he smiled back at me. So it's really made a big difference. I was able to, get him to model, imitate me a whole lot more, doing feeding, just getting him to go, when I did that. It was really fun. So really important for modeling. For social interactions, much easier to connect, even with this weird mask frame, easier to connect with someone who's smiling. It helps. We know so many of our friends and loved ones and clients on the spectrum have difficulty recognizing faces, using certain clues to know who that person is. And this definitely helps with facial recognition. And it's really scary to see someone with half their face covered. I'm seeing a lot of people with like skin tone mask, and those I hate, because it's like, what happened to the bottom part of their face? And, it's a little bit off-putting, or the ones with the lips, huge lips. I'm like, oh, it's crazy. So just think about getting a clear mouth mask, especially if you are teaching someone on the spectrum or working as a therapist of someone on the spectrum. There are alternatives. There are a lot of neck gaiters and bandanas that people are using. Bandanas offer no protection. They just don't. It's very easy to pick up a bandana and tie it around your head. There's no protection there. It's not built that way. Neck gaiters offer very little protection unless it's specifically created for this purpose. So, it's got to be snug fitting. What we're trying to do is filter the air. It's got to be snug fitting by the nose, right? And have multiple layers. So only in those cases are gaiters acceptable. Face shields offer some degree of protection to the wearer, right? Like this little guy. It works as a and splash guard, but of course some air escapes around the edges of the mask. As a therapist going into homes, I really wanted to show my face, and I really tried to justify just wearing the face shield, but it's not safe for me, it's not safe for the person. The best practice is to wear a mask and a face shield together, and that's really important if you or your child is sick or is extra vulnerable. Now, I know that for some people on the spectrum, the only protection that is working at all is a face shield, and it is better than nothing. Absolutely. There are some better brands than others. You want, again, the medical grade plastic. You want a non-toxic foam around the head that really seals it as much as possible, at least around the head. On the Sensory Smarts website, I have an article on face masks and face shields, and I talk about some of the better quality ones that you can look into. So again, like, this is such an abnormal time, and we all know it. We have to somehow normalize it, even though we all know it's completely surreal and weird, right? So there's a free downloadable coloring book at maskcoloring.com that was created, that's the one on the far right, was created by a doctor or a couple of doctors. And that's a really wonderful thing. You can just download and print that out, and that's lovely. There's so many good books that are available. I have a couple of them on your slide. Then there are social stories and books available at autismresourcecentral.org. There are good social stories. We know that by reading about these things, it's just like, okay, I understand it. For your history fans in your life, or for you, reading about the Spanish flu, we know this is not a flu, but it's a pandemic like the Spanish flu, that is a good way to put it into historical perspective. Again, also acknowledging that this time will pass and we will move on from this time. And then there are a ton of wonderful YouTube videos that you can watch, like Jack Hartman's Why Do People Wear Masks? And it just, you know, again, it normalizes it. It's a song. You're putting on your mask. You can listen to it or sing it yourselves. It just takes the totally weird and normalizes it. And that's really important. So you can learn, there's so much for us to talk about, but I really wanted to stick to the pandemic. You can get many, many more sensory smart strategies in my books, for strategies for home, for school, for the workplace, that kind of thing. You can go to my website, sensorysmarts.com, sensoryprocessingchallenges.com. Got a ton of free screening tools that you can print out. A lot more things like that. And if you're on Facebook, join my book pages, just the titles of the books. And I'm always sharing information there that I hope will help you. And you can ask questions of me there, and I'm happy to answer them online. But I think we have about 8 minutes for questions today.
We do. Thank you, Lindsey.
Oh, you're so welcome.
Yeah, there was great information there. Really important to get those updates about how to cope with COVID, and so valuable to get your perspective from a clinician's point of view, what it's like to go and deliver therapies with these different kinds of masks and the challenges that people face.
Yeah, I know it's really tough. It's really tough.
So we do have quite a few questions, and
okay.
If people want to type their questions in the questions section, we'll answer as many as we can in the next few minutes. So here's the first one. Hello, I love your book, and I have a question. My son is 3. He's very sensitive to smells. How can I help him to eat different foods, including meat? So I know you talked a little bit about doing some feeding support for kids. So do you have strategies for people who face that challenge?
Absolutely. I'm not a feeding therapist. I do a little bit of it with my clients, but you know, if there's a real feeding issue, I will refer to a specialist in that area. But let's talk about this. You kind of raised 3 years old, you've raised 2 different things. You've raised smell, but then you've raised eating different foods, and they're kind of different. Let's think about all the senses we're talking about here. Definitely smell. You've mentioned that he's sensitive to smell. A lot of the, people say picky eating, but I know your kids, it's more than picky eating. It's problem feeding, right? It's based on smell and flavor, sure, but a lot of it is about texture. A lot of it is about temperature, and a lot of it is about appearance. So it's a multi-sensory experience. And I often see these kinds of problems with kids who are having multiple sensory issues that are confounding things. And we know when a child has a lot of sensory issues, the world feels out of control. And what can they really control is what goes into their mouth and what comes out of their body. So we start to have a lot of toileting and feeding issues as we move along the sensory sensitivity continuum. So I've written a bunch in my book about working with some of these issues. You've mentioned smell. You want to avoid strong smells if possible. If the child is super sensitive to the way different foods smell, some kids can't stand the smell of bananas, for example. You want to have a lot of ventilation, so they're not like getting that banana smell in, so you want to be moving the air through and getting rid of some of those smells. You can diffuse a calming scent. What you want to do is really, you need to kind of break down what is it? Is it the smell or is it the texture? When we talk about meat, meat is a specific texture. Not every child is a meat eater, and there's a lot of reasons why. I'm going to put aside the whole question of health and all, all that stuff. We're not talking about that. But when we think about the motor issues that's involved with meat, well, if you do smell it, and there's a toughness to meat, no matter, I'm sure you cook it as tenderly as you possibly can, but there's that chewing, it can be very difficult. So you really want to make sure the food is soft, break it up into small pieces, have the child drink a favorite beverage with it to wash it down. There's so many different aspects to it. We could do a whole workshop on this. What I do want you to do is pick one food at a time to introduce, and introduce it slowly. Let's say you've decided, our family, it's got to be hamburgers. I want my child to eat a hamburger. So you need to slowly introduce it. Again, keep the air moving so there's not the strong smell that's overwhelming the child. Keep the pieces, little tiny hamburger. Keep it small, keep it manageable. You may just need to have it on a plate nearby for a while until your child isn't freaking out about the hamburger, and slowly introduce it. It may be so extreme that you need to sit with your child and make a hamburger collage, find photos of hamburgers and cut them out and glue them onto a piece of paper, that kind of thing. Slowly, progressively introduce it, but recognize that, for some kids, it really is impossible for them to tolerate certain textures, and you may need to work with a professional who can help to desensitize the mouth, who can help to figure out if there's a swallowing issue, if there's a hyperactive gag reflex, what to do about that. There's so many aspects to feeding to think about.
All right. This next question is about, you talk a lot about breathing. And this person, I'm not sure if she's a therapist or a parent, but she's asking how to help a child who's totally dysregulated to sit down and do these activities. She's acknowledging that it's been a challenge, and it's been hard to make a bubble mountain. So do you have ideas about that?
Yeah, so it is hard to go from this dysregulated, kinetic state to the calm, focused thing where you can work on breathing. And I always try to meet kids where they are. If a child is bouncing against the walls, you're not going to get them to sit down and make a bubble mountain, obviously. So, all right, how do we organize very large, gross motor kind of behaviors? Start with running, start with climbing, start with deep pressure, heavy work. We call it heavy work, using the large muscles of the body to really get the energy out, to burn off some of the energy, right? To put on some music, have the child sing. If a child is singing or even speaking loudly, they're breathing, and start to bring the music into a more quiet place, into more rhythmic. Adding other sensory things can help to regulate somebody. For a child who's not ready to sit down and do a bubble mountain, to maybe give them a kazoo or some kind of musical instrument that they can easily activate by blowing could be helpful. So this kind of thing can help. So go from that large state, large movement state, to the smaller movement state and the breathing.
All right, I'm hoping we could squeeze in one more question.
Okay.
All right, so we got a lot of questions centered on sound sensitivity. There was a parent who said, if trains go by their house at night and their son can't sleep. Another parent or a grandma who said any small sound, her granddaughter will squeeze someone's arm or tell her to shush. So all these different issues that kids have with that. Do you have suggestions about how, from an OT perspective, they might help them manage that?
Okay, yeah, sound sensitivity is huge. And yeah, so to break it down really quickly, most of us start to hear at between 0 to 15 decibels of sound. People with hypersensitive hearing, oversensitive, hyperacusis kind of hearing can hear as, can detect sound at levels as low as negative 15 decibels of sound. So you can imagine if you can hear that well, like your system is just being flooded by sound and it's really overstimulating and overwhelming. So what do you do about it? It's a multi-pronged thing. So our first job as grown-ups is to protect a child from pain. If a child is saying to you like, it hurts my ears, it's too loud, right? We need to protect them from pain. Sound blocking, headphones, earmuffs are very helpful for a lot of people when it's too much noise. So not to be worn all day, but when a person is overwhelmed, that there really is a good place for that. So if there's a thunderstorm, if there are fireworks, if there's, a car alarm going off outside, that kind of thing, the child is just tired and overwhelmed and flipping out and needs that sensory space, then you could put in the sound blocking headphones. So protection is the first prong. Normalization is the second prong. If it's a particular sound that's upsetting for the child, record the sound and listen to it together. So it becomes like, oh, that dog barking. It's like, I know what that is. It's not going to scare me, right? And then the other thing is to build skills, to work with a therapist on an auditory integration desensitization program. That's something that an OT or sometimes a speech therapist will do, such as therapeutic listening or the listening program, where the person listens to specially engineered music over headphones, typically twice a day, that helps to exercise the inner ear so that the child, same way you'd exercise the muscles in your arm if they were weak, it exercises the muscles of the ear so that they're more easily able to tolerate noise. As a parent trying to go to bed, have a child go to bed, very difficult if they're constantly waking up. I would set up a white noise machine in the room so that there's like a constant level of noise that blocks out all of the disturbing extraneous noise. There's also a website called mynoise.net. And this is something that I think you're going to love. It's free. And there are pre-recorded noises there. There are noises that you can mix so that it's just right for that person. There's industrial sounds, there's nature sounds, there's choral music, all kinds of things. So you can really personalize it and play that music or the hiss, the pink noise, the white noise, to help to create a safe sound field for the person so that they can sleep better and function better.